Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of Road to the Blue Map, Week 8 this week in the AHSAA season, the 9th week of the year. And, getting into the thick of it and about to figure out who's going to be in, who's not going to be in. This episode right here is presented by the Henry House in Guntersville. We want to thank the Henry House for their sponsorship here with us and Average Joe Sports Talk, allowing us to be here and bring you Road to the Blue Map each and every week, talk about all these big games and all these big-time opponents. And the Henry House in 1893, the Henry House, a nationally registered historic Victorian home, was born from one of Alabama's wealthiest families. After a top-to-bottom facelift by Little Pink House's construction, this is the go-to luxury spot beside the city harbor in Lake Guntersville. Perfect for a staycation, weekend getaway, and a Mokes of North Alabama moke ride around beautiful Lake Guntersville, which is awesome. Me and Bo have done that. We offer whole property rental for weddings or your special events. We also rent our 5 beautiful in-suites by the night individually for those romantic occasions. We appreciate the Henry House in Guntersville and allowing us to be here and bring you Road to the Blue Map each and every week. Bo, we said it at the beginning, Week 8, Week 9 really of the AHSAA season is here. We say it every week. I know it gets old, but it goes by so fast. We look forward to this so much every year.
It goes by so fast, and we're sitting here outside today. Honestly, it feels 50 degrees or less here in Guntersville right now, which is fantastic. I know they're definitely a little bit colder because of the altitude, and we're by a lake right now. But at the same time, it's here. Fall's here. Football season is entrenched in us now. This is what everyone in the state of Alabama looks forward to, is when the grass is dying and the leaves are falling, the football time in the air, and all the ladies out there are drinking pumpkin whatever. They got pumpkin candles, pumpkin soaps, everything. This is the time of the year that is looked to in the state of Alabama as football time.
It's my favorite time of year, period, when it comes to sports. You've got NBA getting going, NHL, MLB playoffs, you got football going on left and right. It's the best time of year, and if you're a sports fan, you got to love October, November, and what this time of year brings. Michael Lotta, we see you out there. He said what's up to both me and you, Bo.
So, what up, buddy?
We see you and appreciate all you guys tuning in. Look, if you want to comment, Brandon Taylor, what's up, gentlemen? What's up, Brandon? Hope you guys are doing well. If you guys want to comment, there may be some games that we talk about or don't talk about that you guys want to hear about. Let us know if we don't talk about them, and we'll mention them. We try to get all of them in. We only have so much time and so many games to get in. So we've got 35 on the deck for you tonight. We'll have our 5 Watkins Heating and Cooling games of the week coming up at the end of this as well.
Watkins.
Yeah, so make sure to stay tuned to the very end to hear the top 5 games. And I got a feeling you're going to want to hear a lot about the last game that we're going to talk about here tonight. Getting things started, Maplesville at Lochapoka. That'll be your AHSAA TV game of the week this week. So you can find that on WOTM, My68. You can download the WOTM app on Roku, Apple, Fire Stick, any of that type of stuff. And then if you have, Charter, any of those type of stuff, DirecTV, you can get the WOTM channel on there. And if you have NFHS Network, you can get it on there as well, and you can watch any game. And if you don't have NFHS Network, I do suggest getting it. It's high school heaven when it comes to watching sports, and not just during football season as well. But Maplesville at Lochapoka will be a huge game. Maplesville 5-2, 5-0 in the region. Lochapoka 7-0, they're 5-0 in the region. Maplesville a 5-point favorite on the road in this one, which is a little surprising, but a huge 1A game. I think it's cool. I was telling Bo, last week we were at Benjamin Russell Pelham. It's a 6A game. You get to see a big, a nice stadium there in Alexander City at the Sportsplex, what a big 6A game is like. And then now you flip the script, it's a 1A game this week, and I think that's what the TV network game of the week should be about, showcasing all the classifications, all the different levels of football here. And it doesn't get much bigger in 1A this week than Maplesville at Lochapoka. Maplesville's 2 losses this year to Meek and Isabella, who are in higher classifications than them. And outside of that, they have played extremely well within 1A. They beat Otaugaville 46-13, Billingsley 43-13, Notasulga 26-0. But you look on the other side for Lochapoka, they beat a 2A Lafayette to start the year 32-12, which is very impressive. Beat a 3A Beulah 14-12 at the beginning of the year, and then they've ran through 1A fairly easily. Their closest game, a big rivalry win there with Notasulga, 12-6 at home should be a lot of fun with those two teams getting going on Thursday night. And then, Bo, tell them about another huge game on Thursday that'll be happening right there in the Birmingham area.
Yeah, so in the Birmingham area, we're going to have Pleasant Grove at Carver Birmingham. Pleasant Grove is 6-1, 4-1 in region play. Carver Birmingham's 3-4, 1-4 in region play. So this is going to be sort of a lopsided game from a statistical standpoint, from a betting odds standpoint. Pleasant Grove is a 33-point favorite, but anytime you play any of those inner city Birmingham games, there's a chance of a team rising up. If Pleasant Grove is playing their C game and Carver Birmingham is playing their A game, this could be a four-quarter game. So in this kind of situation, Darryl LeBeau wants to get out there, handle business early, get some younger guys in. On the season, outside of the Ramsey game, Pleasant Grove has handled everybody. But there is a little chink in the armor. We're used to seeing them outscore at this point of the season, they probably outscored their opponents 400 and something to 75 or 50. Not this year. They've only outscored their opponents 262 to 130. And they got beat. And when they got beat bad versus Ramsey. Ramsey handled them very well. I mean, Ramsey beat them. What was the final in that game? 49-7 to Ramsey. Yeah. So when you look at those kind of things, you're like, is there a chink in the armor? Is Darryl LeBeau not as good as they have been recently? I don't know, but this is another Thursday night showcase where the whole entire state can watch it. So we'll find out a little bit more about both of these teams. And this is the last, Carver Birmingham, this is for pride. They're 1-4. They don't have a chance at region. They don't have a chance at hosting. I don't even think they got a chance to get in the playoffs. I have to relook at the region standings, but this is about pride for them. So let's see if they're going to stand up and give Pleasant Grove that game that everybody wants to see on Thursday.
Quintavious Henderson comments. He said, let's go Collinsville. Collinsville's had a good year so far this year. They've run into a couple speed bumps. Those speed bumps are pretty good. We're going to talk about them later on.
Talk about those two speed bumps.
Yeah, later on. So, but great year for Collinsville, and always good to see them have success. People don't know my grandmother actually lives like 5 miles down the road from Collinsville High School. So I've always kept up with Collinsville and always loved to see them do well up there. Opelika at Enterprise, a huge game Thursday night in that region that's got Auburn, Enterprise, Phoenix City, Dothan, Prattville, Jeff Davis, all those teams in there. Pretty much for Opelika, they've got to win this one in order to get into the playoffs. And for Enterprise, if they lose this one, they could not get in as well. And Dothan has the tiebreaker over Enterprise after beating them last week. That gave them their second region loss. And it's crazy thing. I mean, they could go from being a one-loss team to in 2 weeks being out of the playoffs here with losses to Dothan and Opelika. The game is at Enterprise, which is important. It's a long trip from Opelika to get down to Enterprise. And then Enterprise is a tough place to play if you've never seen it, never been down there. They've got 2 decks on their home side. They fill it up. It's a community that supports really well down there. And, Coach Blackman's done a fantastic job since moving over there from Spanish Fort over to Enterprise and has really helped change that program back to being one that's competing each and every year. And so really a huge game, for Opelika. It's been kind of a weird year. They're 4-4 overall, but you look at their losses, Auburn, Phoenix City, and Thompson are 3 of their losses. So, that's pretty good there. And then Theodore's the other one who's a really good 6A team. And their defense is just phenomenal. Played Spanish Fort to a really tough game, 8-3 down there. So, you can't pay attention to the record for Opelika because of who they've lost to and the way they've competed. Only 28-18 against Phoenix City. Not many people have played Phoenix City that close this year. Auburn, it took a swing pass out in the flats in order to take a lead in the last minute of that game to win that one. So, Opelika's right there a couple of plays away from being a 6-2, 7-1 team and being right there at the top of 7A as well. They competed pretty well with Thompson for a while until Trent Seaborn really got going in that ball game, and Thompson was able to pull away late, but should be a really fun one down there at Enterprise on Thursday night.
I don't think the two teams like each other either.
Yeah, no, they don't.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So that will be a really interesting. And
then Blackman's brother spent some time at Opelika.
That makes it even more interesting. Now we'll kick off our Friday coverage. We're going to kick this off with Spring Garden at Donahoe. Spring Garden's having a really good season this year under Coach Garrett Ragsdale. He's 6-2, 3-1 in region play. Donahoe, unfortunately, has not gotten off to the start they want, and they've been really struggling. They're 0-7, 0-5 in region play. But if you look at this game from a historical standpoint, Caleb, here's an interesting stat from you. All time, Spring Garden, guess what their record is against Donahoe? Take a guess.
How many times they played?
They've played 32 times.
32 times. Spring Garden's record against them?
Yeah.
I'm going to go with 13-19.
They're 10-22.
Wow.
all time versus Donahoe. So Donahoe has had some success against them in the past, but I don't know about this one, Caleb. They're a 30-point underdog heading into this game, and Spring Garden has that big one next week versus Ragland. Okay, that's looming. I don't know if Donahoe can put it together on this week. It's going to be tough. I'm just telling you, it's going to be tough for Donahoe, but anytime you got a big game looming like they do, that's what the coaching staff at Donahoe's got to be preaching. They're not thinking about us. They're thinking about next week with Ragland. They've got to win that game versus Ragland to host in the first round of the playoffs. So that's what they're going to be playing on, but I don't know if it's going to matter in this one because that's going to be very tough sledding to go against the Spring Garden.
And
team.
Spring Garden seems to kind of be getting going right here over the last couple of weeks.
Ever since that Cedar Bluff game, it's like awakened them. They're playing much better football. Next game is going to bring us to Winterboro at Wadley. Now, this is a interesting game right here, Caleb, because this is a region game versus two really good teams. And if you look at Winterboro, they're 3-4 on the year, but they're 2-2 in region play. So they're still positioning for playoffs right there. Wadley has pretty much taken this region by storm. You know, they burst onto the scene with a 40-something to 7 victory over Spring Garden. I don't know what the total is. I can find it's on our sheets right here. But 40-something to 7 victory over Spring Garden, 41-7 total. Then they beat that same Donahoe team, 48-0. They beat Ragland, which we just talked about, 32-6. But then they lost to Randolph County, which you don't hang your hat on.
Pretty good 3A.
Yes, 2 classifications above them and rolling. And then they beat Victory Christian, last time out, 34-0. So in Winterboro, Schuyler Mansfield, here's what you want to do in this game. Wadley has a lot of things going on positive. They're going to be hosting. They're going to be region champs. All this stuff. You want to go in there and be the thief in the night, so to speak. You want to go in there and steal one, and I think they have the team to do it. They're going to have to play with their hair on fire. Wadley's outscored their opponents at this point of the season 245-90. They also lead that series 15-5 all time. So, Wadley's handling business in a big way down that way. Next game's going to bring us to probably, I don't even think it's probably, the most talked about team in the state of Alabama. 1 through 7A this last week was the Coosa Christian Conquerors. They're coming off, they had an appeal today that did not go their way. So their record remains 2-5 on the season, 1-3 overall, and they are in the playoffs now. What I mean by that is they lose one of these region games, they're going to the house. They end the season with Victory Christian, but before they can get to Victory Christian, they have 2 more region games, and the first one's going to be Appalachian coming up this week. Now, Appalachian on the season's 4-3, 2-2 in region play. Appalachian had a big-time injury recently that's really hurt them, but Appalachian started out really good this year. App lost right out of the gate to Locust Fort, but Locust Fort's undefeated and averaging 60 points a game. All right, but then check this out. Right after that, they beat Gaston 35-0, Cleveland 34-20, then Woodville 35-22, then Galesville 39-20, but then they lost to Decatur Heritage 22-7 and 37-8 to Valley Head recently. So that Valley Head one's the one that really hurt them. That hurt them in playoff seeding and things like that. But it looks like they're going to be the 4 seed, and Coosa, if Coosa can win this one, is going to move up. Coosa's got to win this one definitely to continue moving up. If they win out, Coosa's going to end up being the 3rd seed. It's going to put App as the 4 seed if they win out. Both teams win out.
I can tell you that there's a 1 seed out there that is matching up with this region that is praying that Coosa Christian wins out then. I can tell you that.
Yeah, and Coosa's actually going to be the 3rd seed if they win out.
That's what I'm saying. There's a 1 seed out there that's praying that they do win out and get that 3 seed.
That 1 seed was the previously mentioned. That 1 seed, the previously mentioned Wadley, is who that would be. So that would be an interesting game. Now, all eyes in the state's been on Marco Bryant and his Coosa Christian Conquerors this week for putting up, was it 94 points last week against Cedar Bluff. Our phones have been blowing up. Our inbox has been blowing up. But again, the man said what he said. He did what he did. So, that was his choice. I've talked to him since. I've talked to him before the game. He hasn't wavered. So, maybe they got it out of their system. Maybe this game's going to be a little bit different. You got to go out and beat Appalachian now. All the 2-week layoff. Then you go out and you play and you put up 94. Well, now, none of that means anything if they can't get a win Friday, Kevin. Yeah. It means nothing. So I'm gonna kick it back to you.
No, and it will be interesting. I mean, like you said, they've been the talk of everything, and if their kids aren't paying attention to the noise. They should be able to go in and take care of business. If they are paying attention, and that's more the focus than the game itself, that's where you can get hurt. But look, we know Coach O'Brien really well, and him, Teddy, all those guys, they're going to have their guys ready to play on Friday night. And I think it's a hungry Coosa Christian team. I think this may be one of the worst things that's happened for the state, because I think they've gotten hungry again, big time hungry and ready to go play. And look, I think it's easy for a lot of other people to sit around that aren't in the fire every single day and say how things should go and how they would do things and all that, but you're not the one that's coaching. You're not the one that's been with these kids since the spring, and the one that's having to deal with a team that has overall gotten hurt by some of the results that, were come to by the AHSAA and everybody, putting them in that position. So, I mean, when you're not in that position, you don't know how it is for other people and how they react and why they react and all that type of stuff. I know Coach O'Brien, that he's a great guy. He's a great man and a very good football coach. And he has a reason for doing everything that he did. And, hey, the other side could stop him as well. So,
that's right.
It's your job to play some defense to keep him from scoring 94 also, in my opinion. So, Valley Head at Woodville. This is going to be this is an underrated game, I think, up here in our area. Valley Head 5-2, 3-1 in the region. Woodville 5-2. They're 2-2 in the region. It's a big game here for Woodville. You get it at home. You're 11-point underdogs against a very good Valley Head team who I think they're starting to find themselves a little bit as well. You look at their last couple of games: 61-14 over Eider, 44-20 over Cedar Bluff, and then 37-8 over a good Appalachian team last week. So Valley Head seems to really be really kind of finding themselves. And then you look at it for Woodville. I mean, a tough game last week. You faced the number 1 seed in your region, Decatur Heritage, and actually played them extremely well at 21-6. Now you got to bounce back. You can't let Decatur Heritage beat you twice if you're Woodville. I think that's one of the biggest keys into this week. So really interested to see how Woodville handles this game going into it after a tight one with Decatur Heritage. And then for Valley Head, can you keep it going? I mean, you've been playing extremely well over the last couple of weeks. This is when you want to be playing your best heading into the postseason. And so really, really interested to see how this one plays out on Friday night.
Yeah, Valley Head has got new life, man, and they got a lot of pride up there. I mean, you're sitting here looking at a 5-2 team, 3-1 in region play. They're having an excellent season.
Yeah.
A really good season. I got to watch those guys in the weightlifting meet, earlier this year. They got some good-looking kids out there, and they're playing with a lot of sense of pride right now. Going on the road versus another 5-2 team. Like you said, it's an underrated game, but I honestly think that's going to be a good high school football game for Friday night. Next game is going to be Laverne, who's 6-2, 3-2 overall, at Reeltown, who's 7-0, 5-0. Caleb, this is what the odds makers think of Reeltown this year. They have come up on everybody's radar. After the Fife loss in the state championship game years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
3 years ago. They disappeared. And, I knew Matt Johnson. We interviewed Matt Johnson. I talked to Matt Johnson last week. Great man of God, great man of character. Talking to him, you get the sense that this guy, the reason that they're back in the limelight is they took a step back. They lost some seniors that year, but now he's done it the right way to build them back up to where they are. I'm proud of what he's done. He's not under the radar no more, Caleb. Everybody in the state in 2A has took notice to what they're doing this year. They're playing a 6-2 team that was also in the state championship game versus Fife just the year before they played them, and they're a 28-point favorite. That'll tell you what the odds makers thinks about this time. The Reeltown has been on. Reeltown's been a machine this year. I mean, they have. Listen to these scores, Caleb. They beat Tallahassee.
5A Tallahassee.
5A Tallahassee, 41-14. They beat Lafayette, 41-6. Goshen, 43-18. Barber County, 47-8. Cleburne County, 68-3. Lynette, we're talking Lynette that's won state championships.
Yeah.
The stories that played there, 50-7. And Horseshoe Bend, 48-6. I hate to say this, Caleb, they ain't been tested. Not only have they not lost, they ain't been tested. Laverne, can they step up and test them this week is the question.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. I got to see Reeltown Friday night against Horseshoe Bend. I did that game on the radio, and I'm telling you, Reeltown can do whatever. They line up in the wishbone. They'll pound you. They'll spread you out. They'll sling it around. They've got Arthur Woods at running back, who is extremely good. And they got his brother as well out there. He's a younger guy who made some plays. And very, very good football team. Very well coached football team, too. I think
Has Matt Johnson been talking to Danny Horn?
Well,
I mean, you tell me. If he's running the wishbone,
I'd probably take some pointers from him too.
You got that right.
I don't blame him on that one. Should be a fun one though. There, I mean, Laverne, Reeltown, and if Reeltown wins that one, it sets up huge game with Highland home next week.
No question.
It'd be an undefeated versus undefeated. Winner wins the region. Loser would be the number two seed. So, if Reeltown can just go out there, take care of business against Laverne, I mean, it sets up for one of the biggest games in the AHSAA next week between Reeltown and Highland home. Isabella at Vincent on Friday night. This should be a really interesting one. Isabella 5-2, 3-2 in the region. Vincent 6-2. They're 4-1. Their only region loss is to BB Comer. They also got upset by Childersburg 16-14. I think Vincent let BB Comer beat them twice.
I agree with that.
We talk about teams letting. I think they were so focused on being on statewide television, all that type of stuff, and then not trying to be rude, but laying an egg. You go 0 points out there and don't play very well. And if you watch the game, I did the game. You were there. They missed a couple fourth downs early in the game that would have really changed that game. They're in that ball game. I don't think BB Comer's 36-0 better than Vincent, and so
you can see on their faces it got in their heads.
Yeah. So since then, they've kind of turned it around, gotten back going, and went over Ranburne 33-20, went over Woodland 41-7. So it seems like Vincent's kind of getting things back going at the right time here for the playoffs. This game's very important for Vincent. You lose this one, you lose the opportunity to probably host a playoff game in the first round. So kind of must win for them from that standpoint. And for Isabella, you win this one, you now put yourself in position to possibly host in the first round. So a huge game. The odds on AHS, FHS have this as basically a pick 'em. Vincent a 1-point favorite at home, but it's basically a pick 'em, and should be a really fun game there between those two teams. Another big matchup right around that same area, Ranburne at Thorsby on Friday night. Ranburne 3-4, 2-3 in the region, and so their playoff hopes are still alive. You got to take care of business here at the end, but still have their playoff hopes alive. But they're going to have their hands full with the Thorsby team, who played Comer really, really well. It's 15-7 at halftime before Comer kind of woke up and really turned it on in the second half. But it shows you how good this Thorsby team is to be in that ball game with them. So going to be tough for Ranburne to go over there to Thorsby and get a win. But it's a Thorsby team who's just kind of quietly sat around. They were undefeated in the region last week going into the Comer game. We all knew it'd be kind of tough for them to beat Comer, but I think them being in that game for as long as they were before Comer really got going. Yeah, here's the bottom line. If you hadn't seen BB Comer play,
might want to.
They got athletes. And athletes that not a lot of 2As have. They got a quarterback that can sling it over the yard, and then they got a running back who's going to Memphis and is 6 foot.
Maybe the best
230.
Maybe the best looking athlete period in the state.
Yeah. So it's a really good Comer team. It's an experienced Comer team that played for a state championship last year as well. And so Thorsby being in the game as long as they were tells me a lot about them. And that should be a really interesting game. And if Ranburne can go get a win there, all of a sudden, it really changes their season.
It changes the narrative.
And what they can do here going forward, and probably changes the confidence of that team as well. Big game up here in this area around Guntersville, Gadsden, all around in here. Pleasant Valley at Southeastern on Friday night. Pleasant Valley started out the year really well. They beat Donahoe, West End, Holly Pond, Cleveland. All of a sudden, they kind of ran into a gauntlet there as they ended up getting Raglan, Locust Fork, and Spring Garden back to back to back. And, it's caused a little bit of issues for them. But, look, 61-6 to Locust Fork. They're beating everybody like that this year. And, 39-6 to a really good Raglan team, 39-14 to Spring Garden. This is a tough game to have to try to get back up for now here with Southeastern, who is coming off of a loss to Locust Fork. Now, they only gave up 49 last week, so I guess they should feel pretty proud of themselves. Locust Fork is scoring on everybody, and we're going to talk about them coming up here in just a second. But, this is a huge game for Southeastern. You've had a great year. They were 4-1, 4-0 in the region going into that game last week. Very good opportunity to now bounce back and show everybody, hey, we are still a team you have to pay attention to. Locust Fork's just really, really good. Bounce back, get a big W this week, go play well. And, show everybody that you are a team everybody needs to kind of fear and be ready for when the postseason comes around.
Caleb just mentioned this Locust Fork team, and I'm about to throw some stats at you. They are actually playing at Gaston this week, so they're going to be in North Gadsden playing, Coach Beckett, one of our great friends of the show, who took over Gaston with only 2 weeks before the season started, went out and got a victory versus Asbury week 1, and a lot of positive things heading their way at Gaston. But this is a matchup. This is one of those. You want a David versus Goliath? I got one for you right here, Caleb. Check this out. Locust Fork has outscored their opponents on the season 431 to 88 in 8 games. If this was 10 games, they would be averaging 43 points a game. Think about that. They've outscored their opponents 431 to 88 in 8 games. Gaston has, since that Asbury game, has hit the snide, so to speak. They haven't won since. You know, they've lost 6 in a row since that time. They're 0-4 in region play. But at this time of the season, with what Coach Beckett has going on over there, they've got new locker rooms. They got a new mindset. They got new workout program. They got a lot of things. Coach Michael Merriman now is the AD over there. He's going to have a phenomenal basketball program coming up. I was actually in their field house the other day. I met with Miss George, the principal, and spoke with her about a lot of the positive things coming from Gaston. Look, Gaston, it is what it is. They had to get to an area to where they push back.
Yeah.
They had to go down, like, I don't know if you want to call it, I'm not going to call it rock bottom, whatever you want to call it. But, you know, Coach Matt Harris is a friend of Average Joe's, ends up leaving the program. Coach Beckett takes over 2 to 3 weeks, somewhere in that range, to get there. He's the right man for the job. Michael Merriman's the right man for the AD job. He's also the right man for the coach's job in basketball because his son, Michael Merriman's a star. Gaston's coming back up, but this ain't the week it's going to happen. I hate to say it. We don't pick games.
No.
We're not picking games. But look, I mean, Locust Fort is doing some unheard of things this year. And this is a really, 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 really ice skating uphill event that Gaston's about to take. But if you're Coach Beckett, this is what you want to see. Let's see who wants to play football. This is about building for the future. Go compete against Locust Fort. Go out there and show me you want to be out there. You're not scared. You're not intimidated. Go out there, pop some pads, make some plays, and let's build on what we got.
Yeah.
I'll kick it back to you now.
No, yeah, I mean, you know, 67-point favorite. That's just.
Yeah, it's a 67-point line on it.
Man.
That's one of the highest
I've
ones
never
I've
seen
seen in a while.
I don't. Wow. It's credit to Locust Fork. I mean, what they've done this year. I mean, we kind of started paying attention early in the year, and just each week we're like, dang, look at Locust Fork. I mean, is this real? Is it? And, well, it's real.
They've been on fire, dude.
Yeah, it's real. There's no doubt about it. Lexington at Hatton should be a really interesting game here. You know, Lexington has played Pisgah as well as anybody has this year, losing 42-27. Nobody else has really come that close to Pisgah in any other game, and it's going to be very interesting. You look at Hatton. Hatton started out the year very, very strong, and you know, their only loss this year is a 20-0 loss to Tanner, who is extremely good this year up there around the Huntsville area.
Yes.
And outside of that, Hatton has played really well. Hatton's a 4-point favorite according to AHS. FHS going into this game. But, you know, it's a Lexington team that they've had their ups and they've had their downs, but when they've had their ups, they've played extremely well in their games, and they've scored a lot of points, and they're going to need that. You know, when you look at them, it seems like, hey, when they have their B game, A game, they play really well and they come away with wins, but they've just had a couple games where they maybe haven't, you know, outside of Pisgah, the loss to Pisgah, just a couple games where they maybe haven't played as well as they wanted to.
How much have we heard that this year?
Yeah.
Outside of the loss? Yeah, go ahead.
But, you know, this is going to be a fun one. It's a tight one, you know, according to the lines, and it's a one for, you know, it's 3-1 against 3-1 in the region. You know, the overall records really don't matter. It's one for, if you're Lexington, you win this one, you're hosting a playoff game. So a huge one here in Hatton. You're in the same boat. You know, they get this one at home, but I think it would say, like, if Lexington can go get a win on the road here, it's a huge statement win. You know, Hatton being at home, being at 6-1, it's not as big of a statement to me. If Lexington wins one, it's a statement of, hey, we're here, and you better get ready to play us, especially at our place when the postseason comes around.
Same record in region play.
Yeah. So Childersburg at Dayville. I'll have this game on Friday night. You know, interesting game here. Dayville is -19 according to AHS, FHS. If they win this one, it basically sets up a winner host. Loser travels as a 3 seed in the playoffs with Randolph County next week.
This is what the WCW and NWA wrestling used to call loser leave town match.
No, yeah.
Do you remember those?
Yeah. Now Dayville has
wrestler number 1 versus Ric Flair, loser leave town match. Go ahead.
But Dayville's got to take care of business against Childersburg, who's been up and down. You know, they beat Mumford to start the year. They then lost to B.B. Comer 34-6. They lost to Randolph County 38-28, but played them extremely well in that game. They then beat Weaver, beat Sachs, beat Vincent, and then they lost to Walter Welborn and lost to Beulah. The loss to Beulah is the one that really kind of stood out to me, where it maybe took a little bit of luster off this game with Dayville because it felt like they've been playing extremely well.
That was kind of a shocker.
It was a shocker, yeah. I mean, because Dayville had just beaten Beulah 41-10 the week before.
That's right.
So, you know, look, this is the Dayville team that likes to line up. They run the I formation. They want to run the football at you. Childersburg wants to spread you out. They run a spread offense and all. That's going to be a contrast in styles. Last year, Dayville was able to take it to Childersburg really well, but this is a much improved Childersburg team from the results than where they were at last year. Dayville gets us at home. It's actually their last home game of the year. Dayville only plays 3 home games this season in the regular season. Yeah, so it's a weird schedule. They're only playing 8 regular season games. That's why they're sitting at 3-2. Dayville's only played 5 games up to this point. Childersburg's played 8. how does that factor in, the experience factor, where they've had a lot of time to kind of find themselves? And for Dadeville, they hadn't really been able to get into a rhythm. I mean, here recently they had a bye, played Beulah, had a bye, and now they're going to play Childersburg. So it's tough to get in a rhythm that way. I'm interested to see if that affects them on Friday night. But a big game, and like I said, if Dadeville can win, it sets it up for them and Randolph County to be playing for who's hosting, who's traveling. Last year, that game was for the region championship. Walter Wellborn has won that region now, so big congrats to them, and a great season for Walter Wellborn. And so Dadeville, if they can get a win here, sets up a big game with Randolph County next week that I'm sure we'll talk a lot about, and should be a fun one. Those are two very similar towns and similar programs there, with what Coach Prestrich has done at Randolph County and what Coach McDonald's done at Dadeville.
And you just mentioned Walter Wellborn. I'm about to talk about them. They're traveling to Weaver, a familiar foe. It's interesting with Walter Wellborn. We watched them play last year. You and I did call a game together. And then when you're looking at them traveling at Weaver, over the past 3 to 4 to 5 years, you'd say, they're playing Weaver. Yeah, it's a win. Not this year, man. This Weaver team has showed some of the best improvement we've seen out of any team in any classification. They're 3-4 on the year. And I remember, and I'm not joking, you can go back and watch the Average Joe's video on this. When Coach Ashley was there 2 years ago, he set up a parade when they got their first victory, because they was like 0-30 or something like that. So you fast forward from that to you're sitting here at 3-4 on the season. That's something to hang your hat on.
Yeah.
Now, something that's going to be tough, you always say a positive, you follow it with a negative. Walter Wellborn, region champs, is coming to town. They're 5-2 on the season, 4-0 in the region. Walter Wellborn has done nothing but, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Surprise. You want to call it surprise? We can call it surprise. Coach Smith's a great coach. I'm not surprised that they've won this region, but it's just the calm, steady, physical football, plays defense, runs the football, and it travels. And for them to get a region championship, I'm kind of blown away about the job he's done, because this is the year that nobody's talked about. Mm-hmm. This is the year that they were down. They've graduated everybody. We watched them last year. They were a good football team last year, but they lost everybody. You thought, they're down. You look up, they're 5-2, 4-0 in region play, region champs.
And their only losses are Anniston and Ohatchee.
And
that's when Ohatchee was rolling.
That's when Ohatchee was healthy and rolling. We did find out they do have somebody down. And this line's an 18-point game, but it's a tricky game. So Weaver could make this thing interesting.
Well, it's a tricky game because Walter Wellborn just won the region last week. And so do you sleepwalk into this one and not take them as serious? And
are you going to prepare for the playoffs and let some guys
Weaver's
rest?
Playing well. I mean, 57-7 over Asbury, and then they beat Sacs last week, 41-24. When's the last time Weaver beat Sacs?
And beat them by double digits, like almost doubled them up. Yeah. I mean, that ain't happened since the Weaver days of old.
I told you when I saw Weaver against Dave early in the year, I said, hey, look, this is a different Weaver team than what I saw last year.
And if you even told somebody that early in the year, they would have laughed at you. They'd have been like, bro, you've lost your mind. But it is. It's a different team. Another game in that area, a team from that area that's a very interesting game right here. Check this one out, Caleb. Piedmont is at Geraldine. Now, on paper, if you rewound the clock a couple of years ago and you've seen this game and you've seen Piedmont and Geraldine's playing, this is going to be a barn burner. Well, this year, if you watched Piedmont earlier in the year and you've seen how they started the season off, you'd think, man, they're going to get murdered. Guess what? They've done nothing but improve. Check this out. Piedmont now, listen to this. They lost to Cherokee County 26-7. They lost to Sylvania 23-7. They beat Plainview 24-13. Lost to Ohatchee 38-21. Then they lost to Anniston in the game you called on TV 14-9 in a great one. But then they flipped this thing around, and since then, check this out. They beat Westbrook Christian, and Steve Smith returned back to the Field of Champions 35-19, and then they turned around and followed up with a blowout victory versus Glencoe 58-12. So they've had their ups and downs, but they seem to be trending up 2 weeks in a row on a big statement.
No, yeah, and you could feel that they were trending up that night against Anniston.
That's right.
They were just a couple of executions away from winning.
That's right.
That football game, and you could, their quarterback started playing well, and Coach Jackson told us today when we were talking to him at Anniston, he's like, that guy dropped some dimes against us in that game. You could feel things kind of turning around, and then it's shown the last couple of weeks with beating Westbrook and beating Glencoe the way that they did, and Bo, you look at the region record right here. This game's huge. You could have Geraldine go from beating Fife and all of us talking about, hey, they could go compete for a championship to them having to travel in the first round if they don't win this game.
Could you imagine that?
Yeah.
Now check this out. You got that right, because if they lose this one, Piedmont would own the tiebreaker versus them head-to-head. Check this one out, though. Geraldine's only loss in the year was to Sylvania in a game that didn't have a good showing. Sylvania put up 30-something in the first half. But they followed it up with a 55-6 victory versus AHSAA and a 30-7 victory versus Westbrook Christian in the game that I was at last Thursday. But here is that telltale stat for you, Caleb. All-time record, Piedmont versus Geraldine. What is it?
6-0.
Piedmont has won all 6 meetings.
Geraldine's never beaten them.
Geraldine's never beaten them. So does that big P on their head when they show up and get off the bus, is that in their psyche or not? Now, I know Michael Davis and I know his guys. We featured Jackson Common this week in a post. They are a really, really good football team, and don't take anything from that Sylvania game and think that's the identity of Geraldine. They had a bad half of football. Second half, they competed and actually come out and scored some points. So they've had a bad half of football this season. They're still Geraldine, and they're still a very heavy favorite to make a deep run in the playoffs. That is a huge game. Here's another huge game. Check this one out. Matter of fact, I don't know. This is the biggest game for both of these two teams this year.
Yeah.
Westbrook Christian at Plainview. Now, Caleb, listen to this now. Westbrook Christian is 3-4, 1-4 in region play. They're playing at Plainview, who's 2-5, 1-4 in region play. The game's a pick'em. This one could go either way.
Yeah.
You've got and we've talked about this before. You've got an SEC head coach and a national championship defensive coordinator going up against Steve Smith coach team. I know it's not Jack Hayes and all, but it's still a Steve Smith coach team with some guys over there at Westbrook. This is going to be a very, very important football game into what these two programs are going to be doing moving forward. Both of these teams are starving for a win, and it's been a tale of ups and downs all year for both teams. The computers has this one to pick them. I don't see it any different than that. This game honestly could go either way. It's at Plainview. It's probably going to be a little chilly up there, but this is the type games where you want to see these two programs. Who's going to dig deep and pull this one out is going to be my question.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a really fun one.
And I will be right back. I'm going to run and get me some refill on my soda pop while you knock these next one out.
Got you. I'll have the next couple of games for you right here. And coming up, Glencoe at AHSAA. We've talked about this AHSAA team. They've dealt with now a couple of injuries and a couple of things that have affected them here at the later part of the year. It's really weird when you look at AHSAA because last year they started out not great, 0-6, 0-7, and then won their last couple of games, got into the playoffs, and ended up having a good end of the year where they carried the momentum over to the beginning of this year. But as we found out and as Bo mentioned earlier, they're dealing with a couple of injuries that have really hurt them here recently, and it showed when you look at a couple of their results. A big loss to Hoax Bluff last week. Geraldine was able to come in and beat them pretty handily. Jacksonville 51-6, and all that's coming after they played extremely well there at the beginning. I mean, 32-8 over Sachs, 26-7 over Walter Welborn, who we just talked about, very good football team this year. That's a great win for them. They battled it out with Westbrook, got a 1-point win. Fall to Sylvania, but they put up 34 in the game, scored a lot of points. And then after that, things kind of started to fall apart a little bit after that Piedmont win. And big chance for AHSAA to get things back going. Glencoe 2-5, they're 0-4 in the region. And it's a Glencoe team that has continued to fight, but Piedmont was able to beat them pretty handily last week. AHSAA's a 15-point favorite in this game. Big opportunity, I think, for AHSAA to kind of get back right, get their third region win, move to 3-3 in the region, and start building up, very similar to last year, building up some momentum here to get ready for the postseason, hopefully get healthy, and possibly be able to go do some things there in the postseason as well. JB Pennington at 6-2, 4-1 in the region, is traveling to Susan Moore on Friday night. Susan Moore 5-2, 4-0 in the region. JB Pennington on the road is actually an 11-point favorite according to AHSAA. And AHSAA does use the same metrics that Vegas uses to come up with the college and pro lines, all that type of stuff. It's very similar metrics. They don't get all the stats and things that those guys are able to include, but they use a lot of the same stuff. And so I was kind of surprised to see that JB Pennington was as big of a favorite as they are going on the road. This is a huge chance for Susan Moore. They've had a great year this year. They lost to Douglas to start the season and then also lost to Locust Fork. But as we mentioned, everybody's losing to Locust Fork. So outside of that, Susan Moore's played extremely well. 33-6 over West End, 33-0 over Danville, 36-0 over Asbury, 35-16 over Vinemont. And then they beat Brindley Mountain 50-6 in their last ball game. So maybe building a little bit of momentum coming off that Locust Fork loss. And then for JB Pennington, they beat Hayden to start the year. They lost 42-20. They've played Locust Fork as well as anybody has this year, 42-20. I think really the only one to hold them to 42 or less. They've scored 42 on everybody else they've played this year. Good win over Madison Academy, 26-21. Beat Danville 42-12. Asbury 56-3. Cleveland 41-0. Vinemont 44-6. And Brindley Mountain 63-7. So they've really gotten things going since starting out the season rough there with the losses to Locust Fork and Madison Academy. And, it's a Susan Moore team that, to me, Bo, they've got a lot to prove going into this ball game, and it's a really, really big chance, a really big opportunity for this Susan Moore team to really put themselves on the map, and it guarantees them hosting in the first round as well if they can win this game over J.B. Pennington, who I think you got to give Coach Todd Cassidy, a lot of credit because he got things really going there at Pennington, and the guy that's taken over after him has done a great job of just kind of keeping things going and keeping things steady, and very good program there.
Bit of a rivalry game, too.
Yeah, Michael, a lot of comments. He says, go Susan Moore Bulldogs, and it's a big one for them on Friday night.
I was on the phone with a Susan Moore Bulldog earlier, Coach Smallwood.
Oh, yeah.
The girls coach
it's a good
there.
one. Yeah, she's done some good stuff there.
Laney Smallwood is going to be our Excel Athlete of the Week this week. So
awesome.
Getting a few stats right there. So, yeah, appreciate her. She just messaged her there. That's good. Go ahead, brother. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, yeah, you're good. Big game down in, around the Mobile area. I know it's not really up in our area up here, but, we've talked about this team for a couple of weeks now and been telling you, hey, you better start watching out for them in 4A. St. Michael Catholic is going to Jackson. Jackson's the team that we've been talking about in 4A. Now, St. Michael's very good. They got Philip Rivers as their head coach. His son's playing quarterback as a ninth grader, and is extremely good. That ninth grade class of quarterbacks in the state's nice.
Unbelievable.
So looking forward to seeing how that one develops.
Maybe two at the top of the nation by the time they're seniors.
Yeah, so with him and Trent Seaborn, and then there's another one in there as well that I saw. I can't remember which school, but pretty impressive that we got 3-4 ninth graders playing at some big programs in the state. And for St. Michael's, they competed very well with Gulf Shores to start the year, 41-20. In that game, they beat Chickasaw. They then lost in overtime to Bayside. And Clint Mosley, who has taken over there at Bayside Academy. They beat Escambia 41-26, Satsuma 42-8. They then lost to 6A McGill-Tulane 35-31, played them extremely well, and then beat Orange Beach and Wilcox Central pretty handily. For Jackson, they've run through their schedule. They're 6-0. They're 5-0 overall, and they're a 20-point favorite in this game for a reason. They really haven't had a close ball game. 35-7, 30-2, 38-7, 35-0, 50-7. 49-6. They have not given up double digits one time.
That's incredible.
This whole entire season. So, we're talking about this game to kind of let you guys out there know Jackson is a team to watch for in the 4A. And we talk about Handley, we talk about Anniston, we talk about Catholic and Andalusia. Well, the Jackson Aggies are going to have something to say about 4A South when it's all said and done.
Absolutely.
And, again, we say it every week, but 4A South is the most loaded classification in all of the AHSAA this season. There's legit 7-8 teams out of the South in 4A that if they win it, we'll be sitting here at the end of the year going, yeah, we can see that.
We can see that.
So,
that's exactly right.
Talladega traveling to Anniston. Look for Anniston. This is a game where we talked to Coach Jackson today. You just got to show up and perform well. You can't take this game lightly. You can't go into this game sleepwalking thinking we're just going to roll the football out there and win. Anniston's got to get themselves going. They're 1-2 in the region. This is a region game, a chance to get to 500 in the region. And I think it pretty much locks up a playoff spot if they win this game as well. So a very important game here for Anniston, and one where, look, they've got athletes, and Coach Jackson's done a good job. I think you can start to see them kind of building in the right direction here over the last couple of weeks. And they got the win over Piedmont. Yes, they slipped up against Hanley, but a lot of teams have slipped up against Hanley this year. This is the time for Anniston to really kind of get things going with Coach Jackson, and big opportunity here for the Bulldogs. And, no better team than Talladega. Talladega's been outscored 305-85 this season. So
thank you so much.
Anniston, you got to show up, you got to play well, you got to do your job, and should be able to take care of business on Friday night and set up some fun matchups to get them ready for the postseason. And we talk about all these other teams, but Anniston can be as dangerous as anybody when the playoffs
I wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs.
No.
They're a dark horse in the playoffs when these playoffs begin. What a great visit we had with Coach Jackson today and Coach Adams of Oxford. But fantastic time. You're absolutely correct on that. Poor Talladega, man. They've been up against it the last few years.
Hey, well, I can tell you this. Bill Smith's going to get them going. I mean, we saw what he did at Huffman.
Yeah. Well, look what he's doing since he's exited Huffman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That tells you what you need to know.
I'll tell you what you need to know. They still haven't scored a point all season. At the last time I checked, have they? They're still scoreless on the season?
I mean, they're scoreless on the year.
I've never seen that.
I hadn't either, especially at a place like that. They hadn't always won, but Huffman's always been a thorn in everybody's side, where if you don't show up and play well, they can beat you. And I mean, look, they've got guys in the NFL right now from there, and they can't score a point this season.
They've outscored 400 and something to 0 in the season. This next game, you rewind the clock last year, it's one of the best high school football games of the season. It's Cherokee County, but this time they're traveling to Jim Glover Field, and they're going to take on the Etowah Blue Devils. So much has happened and transpired in this year at Etowah, but they seem to be trending up in the right direction. Cherokee County has been what we thought they were. They are as advertised. They're 7-0. They're 4-0 in region play. Cherokee County has outscored their opponents 304 to 52 on the season. Caleb, you want me to go through those numbers again? Closest game was 49-21 win over Aniana and Fluff Bothell. And in that game, Jacob Cornejo had 400 yards rushing.
Their closest game is 28 points.
28 points. And what's so weird about that is this is what we expected from them. This is what the media across the state expected from them, because, you know, the quote unquote the South's more dominant in 4A South and look on region play standings, all that. It kind of backs it up with the numbers of the teams that could win a blue map. You would say there's a larger number in the South. I think anybody, you're not going to get a lot of arguments from that.
Yeah.
But there's some teams up here in the North that can definitely do it. Cherokee County is the tip of the spear of those teams in the North who can do that. Etowah, let's flip this thing over and talk about them for a minute. Etowah's had a season of ups and downs, and if you look at what has transpired over the last couple of weeks there, you know, they had the bad loss earlier this season. They had a bad loss earlier this season to Fultondale, but then since then they beat Good Hope 28-21. But then they lost to Aniana in a game that was very tight all the way to the end, 62-36. But then they turned around and beat Hanceville last week in dominant fashion, 49-14. So they, you know, it's ups and downs. I think what Blake Bone and company is wanting out of the Etowah Blue Devils at this point is consistency. They've shown they can do it versus Hanceville. They've shown they can do it versus other teams this year. They want that consistency. They want that, yeah, guys, let's show up and do this week in and week out, the performance we had last week. They got playmakers, albeit most of them's young. You know, they're down some linemen, things like that, but they just want consistency. There's a lot of pride in Atala. You know, I'm from there. I grew up at Bradley Park, right across the street from the high school. There's a lot of pride there. You know, you don't think Blake Bones got this right here circled in his locker room, that they're a 28-point underdog, according to the network? I'm not going to keep saying it every time, ASH, FSJS, whatever. But you don't think he's got that plastered? That's probably an Everlocker. The Etowah Blue Devils, a 28-point favorite. That Coach Bones got to love that. That's a blessing. You don't have to motivate your guys this week. Put that up and say, hey, the guys, this is what they think about us.
Yeah.
And this is Atala, and this is the Etowah Blue Devils. That's music to their ears. Good. You know, doubt us. I'm sure that's what they want. And they got the guys that make this game interesting. If you want to be the best, play the best. And Cherokee County proved that they was the best team in the North last year. So this is who Etowah wants to play. This one's at the Blue Hole. This one's in Atala. It could be an interesting football game. This next game, this is an interesting game. Again, you rewind the clock 1 year ago, and you got the Southside Panthers and Alexandria coming in a game that everybody thought was going to be a very even matchup. Alexandria wins going away. Antonio Ross went loony. I don't know what his stats was. I remember he had a tremendous game. I remember talking to Justin Bowen on his way home from that game, defensive coordinator at Southside, and talked about he was just kind of in shock that, you know, they couldn't get the job done and they were having trouble with Antonio Ross all evening. But you fast forward a year, we always talk about Marty McFly and getting in that DeLorean and going forward a year or back a year or 2 years. You fast forward to this year, different story, Caleb. We just had Guntersville on, Coach Reese on earlier today. Nobody's beat them this year. Nobody's beat them. But guess who's come closest? These Southside Panthers.
Yeah.
They only lost 14-10 to them up here in a very close game that could have went either way. And since that time, you know, unfortunately they lost Gage Neesmith, but they've kept it all intact. They're doing two things that travel. You know what those two things are, Caleb? We talk about it all the time. They're running the football. They're playing good defense, and that travels. This time they have this game at home. Alexandria is 0-8 for the first time ever. They was 0-6 for the first time ever. So each week they keep on, it's going to be for the first time ever. Alexandria has been outscored, Caleb, 340-138 this year in 8 games. And I love Todd Ginn. Todd Ginn's the right man for the job. His dad was the right man for his job. His brothers are great assistants. I promise you, Alexandria will be back.
Yeah.
This is going to be a tough game this week, though.
Yeah.
Because Southside is playing really good football at this time. Now, next game, this one give you chill bumps, buddy. The Sardis Lions, 5-2, is at Boaz, 2-5, 0-3 in region play. Sardis 1-2 in region play. But check this out. Boaz losses. Here's Boaz season. Boaz lost 43-21 to Jacksonville. They beat Albertville 48-7. They turn around and play Scottsboro, who's averaging 50 a game on offense at the time. They lost to them 63-38. They turn around, they beat Cleveland County 35-21. They turn around and lose to guess who? Guntersville, who we had on earlier, 35-14. Then 48-45 to this same Southside team we just mentioned in a gut-wrenching loss.
In overtime.
In overtime. And then they turn around and play a third-round team from last year's 5A and region champ AHSAA and lost to them 63-35.
What a schedule.
What a schedule. And then you think, okay, our schedule in years past is about to ease up. Not this year. This is not the same Sardis Lions team. This is a different mindset Sardis Lions team. This is a B.J. Brooks Sardis Lions team. This is the biggest game of B.J. Brooks' career as a head coach. Let me tell you why. You can forget their region record. You can forget their overall record. This is a rivalry game and a rivalry in which Boaz has dominated. Not just won, dominated recently. Okay? So this is a huge statement game. Guess what the talk of the media days was when B.J. Brooks went to media days in Etowah County this year?
Beat Boaz.
Not that. Nope. He changed their helmet. Guess what? Guess what everybody said? That looks like Boaz's helmet. It was the talk for 2 to 3 weeks. B.J. Brooks and Sardis was getting hammered because of their new helmet. That's all they heard. That looks like Boaz's helmet. Guess what? Guess what he did? He took all that. B.J. said, I don't care if anybody thinks it. It's our helmets. We're using them. But guess what? Here's a chance to take all that negative media and press that everybody was saying, you guys are copying Boaz. Now we get to play Boaz.
Yeah.
Coach Sullivan's going to have it. Hey, look, Coach Sullivan's going to be telling them, guys, we've dominated these guys lately. We gotta do what we do. This is a rivalry game. This is a huge game for both of these guys. This is a community game.
Yeah.
Forget the playoff seeding. Forget the region seeding. This is a community rivalry, old school football game, and big one for both teams.
And what's interesting about it is we're used to seeing Boaz come in at 5-2 overall, and maybe Sardis be at 2-5, and now the roles are flipped. Sardis is the favorite. So how do you handle that? It's sometimes a little easier plays the underdog than it is being the favorite. How does Sardis deal with the pressure this week? That's what I'll be looking for.
Hey, here's another key factor, Caleb. Last year in the spring, these two guys met at Sardis with a shot of the state championship in baseball on the line.
A lot of these guys play for football as
you
well.
better believe it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a lot of these guys.
I didn't think about that until you just mentioned it.
That shows you how these communities are at each other. They're in each other's backyard. These guys work together. A lot of these guys are related. This is a huge, huge football game up here in this part of the state.
Man, what does that say about baseball up here? Etowah winning it.
Bro.
Them two playing to get there.
Westbrook won it year before. Southside, Southside's good.
Oxford
won good. Oxford won it. It's incredible in this part of the state.
No, it really is. Speaking of AHSAA and Guntersville, who we've talked a little bit about, they will be playing each other on Friday night. Huge game. We just talked with the Guntersville guys. You can find that with Keeping Up with Marshall County Athletics. It'll be posted on our Average Joe's Facebook page probably tomorrow or Thursday. And it was a good interview with them. It was really interesting talking with them. After talking with them, I'm telling you, this is a Guntersville. I like this Guntersville town. I like their mindset. And we've talked to some other town, Sardis. I love their mindset and the way their kids were talking and stuff. But I'm telling you, Guntersville, you're 6-0. It'd be easy to be cocky right now. You've had a lot of success here recently. Very even keel kids. And I was very impressed with how they credited their coaches. The coaches credited the kids, and the kids credited the coaches. And that's what you want within a program. And they seem to be a hungry group, but it was interesting. They said, hey, we lost 2 games, and that's a down year for us last year. And
they're not joking.
Yeah. And so they got a huge win over Scottsboro, 20-6. I think that the score itself surprised a lot of people. I asked Coach Reese, I was like, were you shocked? He's like, well, I'm an old defensive guy, so I loved it. I was getting tired of everybody saying how much they were going to score on us and all that. And it showed me a lot, able to hold that Scottsboro team to 6 points. They credited their scout team for the look they gave them, and they've credited them for really how well they've been able to play all season.
Who does that?
Yeah.
Who credits their scout team?
Yeah, and then,
that's what they opened talking about.
Yeah, that was the first thing they came up and said, well, our scout team's been great this year. And
that's
so,
right.
It says they seem like a really tight-knit group. They're getting an ARAB team who, I said it to Coach Reese, I think this year they're dealing with, they've had the circle on them all year. Great year last year. They were a play away from possibly going on and winning the state championship if they beat Ramsey in that game last season. And I think they've been dealing with everybody wanting to get after them, wanting to, hey, we know how good they were last year. Let's go get them. And it may be unfair to this year's team because they're not last year's team, but they've had some close games this year. They started out with a dominant win over Albertville, then Brewer. And then that's where you could see that the region had them circled. Douglas plays them 21-14. Sardis plays them 29-26. Then they lose to Scottsboro after they were leading that game 14-0. They lose 28-14 in that one, and then got beat by Fort Payne. And then they turn around and they got back going against Boaz, and that's what's going to make this game really interesting here with Guntersville. You got Guntersville coming off a bye week. Coach Reese sat here and he said, look, I'm semi-worried just because we were playing so well and now we're off for a week. I'm hoping that doesn't ruin the rhythm and hurt us any. And then you're taking on an ARAB team who just put up 63 last week and played extremely well on the offensive side of the ball. So huge matchup here. Guntersville is favored by 15 points in this football game, but I see it being a lot closer than that. I think it's going to be a tight game. I can see it being a 10-point or single-digit game right there around between 6 and 10 is the point total, in my opinion. And it's going to be a tight one. It's going to be a fun one, and it's one for ARAB. You've had an interesting year. You've had all these tight games, all this stuff. You win this game, you've got to win over Guntersville, who, if they win this game, they're pretty much the region champs. And if ARAB wins it, all of a sudden it shakes this region up and throws a wrench into everything. So really, really interested to see how this game ends up playing out and what ends up happening with this one. Douglas at Scottsboro. This is going to be an interesting one as well because, Douglas has not had the year they wanted. We talked to them on Keeping Up with Marshall County Athletics last week, and they said, look, we've just been banged up from the get-go. From the preseason game, they lost a very important player on their team, and from that point on, it's just added up. And you feel really bad for them because they've gotten going in the right direction and had a lot of, talk about them going into the season this year. Well, here's your opportunity to get that one big win on the year, and it's at Scottsboro. It's against a team that could overlook you a little bit. You look at Scottsboro, they've had big games the last couple of weeks with Boaz, ARAB, Priceville, Guntersville, Sardis, all in a row. Well, they may look at this and look at Douglas's record and go, hey, we can relax a little bit this week. Well, I can tell you after talking to Douglas, you can't relax against this Douglas team. So
that's right.
While Scottsboro is favored by 27, if Douglas can come in and play that triple option well, all of a sudden the offense maybe isn't playing as well that night, you may see Scottsboro start to kind of get tight a little bit, and Douglas really has nothing to lose going into this one. So really interested in that game. Looking forward to seeing how that one plays out. And if Scottsboro does take care of business, to me, it'll tell you a lot about their team as well, where they hadn't let that loss to Guntersville affect them. They've just continued playing well, and to me, it'll say a lot about their leadership and a lot about what they have there. Benjamin Russell at Briarwood. This is a huge game. For Benjamin Russell, if they win this ball game, I think it puts them in position to be tied with Homewood and Helena potentially if they beat Helena next week. And then if Homewood were to lose and they beat Helena next week, they could win the region, and then they could also be a 3 or 4 seed as well. So that region is crazy there. If Briarwood wins this game, they have the tiebreaker over Benjamin Russell. Benjamin Russell would then be a 4 seed, traveling to a 1 seed. And I think they match up with the Saraland region, so that would not be, yeah. You don't want to be the 4 seed having to match up with a 1 seed. So,
that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, huge game here. For Briarwood, tough start to the year, 31-0 to Clay Chalkville, 37-6 Spain Park. Then they kind of got going, 28-10 Chilton County, 28-21 over Pelham, 21-0 over Oak Mountain. They lost in a tight one to Helena, 28-24. And then beat Calera 38-0. But, Bo, it's not a knock on those other teams, and it's not a knock on Briarwood. But to me, when I look at this, Benjamin Russell would easily be their best win of the season. They hadn't really beaten. Oak Mountain's okay, but they're struggling a little bit this year. We saw Pelham against Benjamin Russell last week. They beat them handily. They're not having as great a year. Chilton County's not great. Calera's not great. This will be the biggest win of the year for Briarwood. It's one they want because last year Vizina was going on a drive to try to win the game. They threw a pass. He was short by about a yard and a half, but the referee ran an extra 5 yards. He ran to the wrong yard marker to mark it. So they thought it was a first down. Then the referees came in and talked about it, moved it back. It was short. Ball game was over, and so Briarwood was upset about it. And you can see why. They probably want to get after this Benjamin Russell team. So it's going to be a really tight game there in Birmingham on Friday night. Benjamin Russell is a 3-point favorite, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how this one goes. And, look, Benjamin Russell's got athletes. I mean, Malcolm Simmons last week had 3 touchdowns in the first half, and he's committed to Auburn University. And you could see why last week, because he just looked like he was on a different level than a lot of those guys out there. So what's going to be interesting, Benjamin Russell's got better athletes than Briarwood. Can Briarwood match up with those athletes and pull them into a game where it's physical and all that? Because that's not – Benjamin Russell doesn't love this – you think of Benjamin Russell, you think of physicality. I mean, with Danny Horn, Steve Savarese, Coach Martin, all those different guys, but they're not as physical as they used to be, and they don't – Danny Horn and them lined right up and just went right at them, and that hurt them. Homewood lined up and went right at them. I'm sure Briarwood's going to try to take the same blueprint, so I'm really interested to see how this game goes. But if Benjamin Russell wins, sets up a huge game with Helena next week.
Well, I was in Smitty Grinder's office last week at Benjamin Russell, and I can tell you, I walked past the guys going in. There's no shortage of athletes there. Malcolm being one of them, which we seen him down there. There's guys there, and I can promise you, I remember that play last year. They do have this game circled, and I can promise you that they are going to get after Benjamin Russell. And Benjamin Russell's on the road. That's another key factor in this. This is going to be an interesting high school game. At a 3-point line, that's going to be a really good game. That's a game that Benjamin Russell really needs. Though.
Yeah, it's must-win for them.
Must-win for them. I agree 100%. All right, check this next one out. Here's another must-win game. Buckhorn is at Fort Payne. Buckhorn 4-3, 3-1 in region play. Fort Payne 4-3, 2-2 in region play. The game that is looming large right now for Fort Payne was the loss that they had earlier this season to Lee of Huntsville in region play in a barn burner, a 49-42 loss. Here's why it was huge, Caleb. It looked like Fort Payne was going away, going to get the number 2 seed and host, since they did lose the Gadsden City game in another shootout earlier this season. You thought they lost that game, 60, I don't know what it was, 63-41. All right, so you thought they're coasting along. Well, with that loss to Lee of Huntsville, that's created a monster here. And here's what it's created. They're playing Buckhorn this week. Region standings wise, Buckhorn is 3-1. Fort Payne's 2-2. Fort Payne loses this game, they're traveling, period. Gadsden City has got to beat Lee of Huntsville. They have to beat Lee of Huntsville. Now, if Fort Payne wins this football game, then Fort Payne is going to shoot back to the 2 seed because they're going to have the head-to-head versus Lee of Huntsville. And the head-to-head versus, not Lee of Huntsville, but the head-to-head with Buckhorn, and then they're going to need a Gadsden City victory. So that's going to play into this game as well. So Fort Payne, Coach Elmore and company is in a must-win. Yeah. They are favored 12. Caleb, what is your thoughts on that game?
I think it's got a chance to be a tight game. For Buckhorn, they've had some ups and downs this year. The loss to Helena really stands out in Gadsden City back-to-back weeks, but they go up 55 and 49 in those 2 games. You look at the rest of the year, they seem to have really figured it out on defense. 21 to Hazel Green. They ended up giving up the 38 to Guntersville, but 6 to May Jemison, 22 to Lee Huntsville. So they seem to kind of be finding themselves. But, for Fort Payne, we kind of talked about it at the beginning of the year, especially on our Saturday show. We said, hey, the defense for Fort Payne could come back to bite them. And it finally did there in that Lee of Huntsville game. So it looked like they may have woke up. They held Hazel Green to 14 points last week and seemed to have played a lot better on that side of the ball. Got to go play well this week because it's a Buckhorn team that they will not be afraid to line up and come right at you.
Just not putting the cart ahead of the horse, but the Fort Payne Buckhorn game in basketball would be a little more interesting this year.
They better be happy Caleb Holt didn't go out there lining up at wide receiver or tight end.
I'd like to see that. He'd probably be pretty excellent. But this one in football,
probably like when LeBron was out there playing wide receiver.
He's a tremendous athlete. Yeah. But there's some really good athletes, and it's going to be on the field in this football game. Very, very interesting game right there. All right, this next one's Gadsden City at Lee of Huntsville. Gadsden City pretty much has that region under locks at this point. Buckhorn may have something to do about that. But here is an interesting fact about this, and we just talked about it. Lee of Huntsville has snuck up and had a tricky good season. They're 4-3, 2-2. The big win over Fort Payne earlier this season really has them in a good situation to not only get in the playoffs, But if they could somehow beat Gadsden City, they're going to make some noise about seeding and where they're going and things like that in the playoffs. And could they mathematically could possibly still host? Mathematically. Now, with a loss here, they can forget hosting. It's going to put Fort Payne. Fort Payne has to take care of business, and Fort Payne will go to the 2C. But none of that means anything without a win here.
Yeah.
So they've got to be prepared for that. Gadsden City, on the other hand, it's been a year of ups and downs. Kudos to Ollie Smith, who will join Lee Osment in the North coaching staff for the North versus South All-Star game. Luke Waldrop, again, is one that'll be joining that team this year, for Gadsden City. So for Ollie Smith, this is a trip up to Huntsville. It's going to be a business trip for them. They are a 20-point favorite. The people in Fort Payne's going to be pulling for them,
Yeah.
That'll
be interesting.
That'll be interesting. So that's going to be a business trip for them. But in Gadsden City's situation, being 4-0 in this region, they want to flex their muscles down the stretch, obviously, getting ready for the playoffs. So go up there and handle business, like they want to do, and keep moving forward.
Oh, they got a chance to carry a lot of momentum into the postseason. 69-0 over Hazel Green, 42-13 over May Jemison. You win this one, you beat Calera next week. You're rolling at the right time of year as a 1 seed, and have an opportunity to really go do some damage there in the North there in 6A. Last game before we get to our Watkins Heating and Cooling games of the week. This one's down in Mobile, so it's not up in our area, but we've talked about this team for a while, and it's a huge game down there. Daphne at 4-3, 3-1 in the region. They're at Mary G. Montgomery, who is 8-0, 5-0 in their region. They're now the number 3 team in 7A. And, Corey told us at the beginning of the year, and we started paying attention, and it's a good thing that we did because this Mary Montgomery team is rolling. They seem to have athletes all over. They seem to have a good balance with what they do there as a football team, and they found ways to win in different ways. They've scored a bunch of points in games and won. They've won 24-10 over Fairhope and 19-7 over Charles Henderson, your defending 5A runner-ups, and they've just been rolling this year. And so they're a 15-point favorite. You got to take care of business. And against the Daphne team, who we know they got athletes, and Coach Kenny King's done a great job down there at Daphne, and they're in a weird spot because they're similar to Gadsden, so they're fluctuating between 6A, 7A right now, 6A, 7A, and if they were 6A, they'd be a really dangerous 6A team. I mean, imagine adding them to that region with Saraland, Spanish Fort, Blunt, all those
6?
teams. I mean, if they went down to 6, I mean, it'd be incredible. So, big game here for Mary Montgomery. If they win this one, they win that region down there, sets them up to host, could be hosting the winner of that Opelika Enterprise game, which would be really interesting on down the line. So a big game down there in Mobile, and I look forward to Saturday morning us getting to recap that game with Corey and talk about that one there. So that's going to do it for our regular games. Coming up, we're going to have our Watkins Heating and Cooling games of the week. So stay tuned. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more right after this.
Brad Watkins, shout out.
Welcome back in to Road to the Blue Map, Week 8, 9th week of the year, but Week 8 according to the AHSAA schedule, and that's the schedule we go by here, Bo. So it is Week 8 according to them.
You
but
sent me to the wrong stadium before, buddy, but go ahead.
I told you about my buddy Chris that calls the Dayville games with me going down to Belo, and then Dayville was hosting Belo.
I'll tell you about me going to Scottsboro.
Yeah, you did that a couple weeks ago. I forgot about that. So, Watkins Heating and Cooling Games of the Week. Again, I want to thank Brad Watkins with Watkins Heating and Cooling. You can see his number right there on the top left of your screen. And, we appreciate him and allowing us to bring you these games. It's the 5 biggest games we feel of the week going into this week. And we got a good lineup of games this week, Bo. And we'll get things started here with Celigent at Tuscaloosa Academy. Obviously, this game's not really around our area, but this is a huge game in that classification there. I mean, for Celigent, 8-0, 5-0 on the season. And taking on Tuscaloosa Academy team that we talked about Saturday during our Saturday morning show, Bo. They've probably made the move from AHSAA to AHSAA as well as anybody in the history has been able to make that move. I mean, they've come over, they've won games consistently, and sitting there at 5-2, 3-1. And you talked about, I mean, they played Fife. They lined up toe-to-toe with Fife last year, and while they ended up losing the game, they didn't back down from Fife, and that comes from after they were playing AISA ball just a year before. And so very, very impressed with what we've seen from them.
Ask anybody in Fife Stadium what their players look like.
Yeah, they got some dudes.
They got some dudes. You can ask anybody at Fife.
That Tuscaloosa area is extremely interesting when it comes to football because it almost feels like all the athletes there are so spread out that they don't have a dominant team, where if they had less schools and their athletes were more compact, it would be almost unfair. I'm telling you right
now, if you rewind the clock to the late 80s, early 90s, and you see what Central was doing and what County was doing, they had migrated to those 2 schools. Central first, then County come on second. Same thing of what's happening in Montgomery right now. When one of these schools step forward and everybody migrates to it, look out. Yeah. Same thing in Huntsville. When one of them schools step forward and everybody migrates to it, look out.
That may happen with Carver, too, with them and Lanier already merging, and then some more people may come up there.
That's correct.
You may see that with Carver coming up, so it's going to be interesting. But should be a really interesting game here between these 2 teams. You look at it for Tuscaloosa Academy. They lost to ACA out of Tuscaloosa, who is extremely good, and then I think it was an upset and a really surprise, and then they must have just not shown up defensively this night, but Lamar County beat them 52-35, and it's a Lamar County team that Celigent just beat 48-6, and Celigent's only a 4-point favorite in this game against Tuscaloosa Academy, so that shows you that something happened that night with Tuscaloosa Academy. They just didn't play as well. Something tells me they're going to be ready for this game, though, here with Celigent. They get this at home. You got to look at, I mean, I know they played Fife last year and all that. This may be the biggest game since they've come over to the AHSAA for Tuscaloosa Academy against an undefeated Celigent team.
It's an opportunity for them to show everybody that they are for real. Last year, like you said, they didn't get it done against Fife, but they had a good showing and a lot of eyes and ears perked up. And when they were warming up in that game, I remember I was there going, dude.
This may get interesting.
This might get interesting. and it did for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then Fife them. It was warmed down.
We talked about Danny Horning. Well, Paul Benefield.
Yeah, he Paul Benefield them at Paul Benefield Stadium. Now this next one, this next one's interesting, Caleb. I want you to listen to this now. 6-1, 5-0 in region play. Sylvania is at Hoax Bluff, 5-2, 4-1, coming into this season. Hoax Bluff has done a phenomenal job, not a good job, a phenomenal job at coming in under the radar. And to be sitting here at 5-2, 4-1 they've done a really good job of handling business and winning the games they're supposed to win, and the games that they're quote unquote on paper are not supposed to win, being very competitive in those. Their worst loss of the year was to a 5A team, which is 2 classifications up above them, albeit an inter-county rivalry to Southside, but that was when Southside had all their guys, and they lost that game 37-12. But then listen to this. Then they beat Glencoe 47-7 in a rivalry game. That's when everybody they noticed them.
Yeah.
Because that game was dominant.
And then the next week as well.
And then the next week they played Geraldine, and it was 7-7 forever.
Yeah.
And then Geraldine scores late to make it 17-7, but the game could have went either way. But the biggest one of the year to me was the following week when they beat Westbrook. They beat Westbrook, 47-21. in a game that everybody thought could go either way. Well, they went it, doubled them up and beat them.
Mm-hmm.
Then they beat White Plains 44-12. And then the game I attended was Plainview. They won that game 28-14. And then, and then Ohatchee game 35-6. So let me tell you this. The computer has this one a 4-point line. And we just talked about Tuscaloosa Academy and Sologent. And you look at 8-0, 5-0 Sologent. Well, they're only a 4-point favorite over Tuscaloosa Academy. Well, look at Sylvania. They're 6-1, 5-0, and only lost to a dominant Pisgah team that's averaging 60 points a game, and they lost that game. They put up 34 points in that game and lost by 6, and then pretty much dominated everybody across the board outside of that game. But this is a 4-point game for a reason, because guess what Hokes Bluff does? Get ready. Broken record. Ready for this? Run the football, and they play defense.
Yeah.
What have we talked about all week? What do we talk about every week? They do two things really well. That's run the football, they play defense.
Yeah.
That's why this is a 4-point game.
And they get the game at home. That's all. I mean, while home field advantage isn't as big as college, NFL, because of noise and all that, it's still big. I mean, the kids from Guntersville talked about it earlier today, where they were like, I think one of our worst games is going on the road to Lawrence County because we had so much time to sit around on the bus. The seats are uncomfortable. And while it's not as long of a trip for Sylvania to get to Hokes Bluff, you're still having to go on the road, and you get out of your routine a little bit. And so this game, it could change everything in that region. I mean, all we've talked about is Sylvania and Geraldine. All of a sudden, Hokes Bluff, they get a win here. It's a three-way tie right there at the top. And one of those really good teams is going to be traveling in the first round. And you got to give Hokes Bluff a ton of credit for the turnaround they've had from last year to this year and the way they played this season.
Here's another X factor in that. And you talked about it yourself, the traveling aspect. Mm-hmm. Sylvania and Hokes Bluff are not right down the road from each other. I mean, that's a travel. You're looking at an hour travel there. Or better, depending on if you're on the bus or not. And then when you're at home, you know where the play clocks are. You're used to your locker room. You're used to everything. When you're on the road, you have a tight-knit, this us against the world mentality, but the Woodshed's not an easy place to get a win to begin with. And that place is going to be rocking. Yeah. And that's going to be a heck of a football game.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of excitement right now in Hokes Bluff too. So that'll help add to it. And you get, while pep rallies can be a distraction, they can also be something that pumps you up. The school's behind whenever, when it's just a regular old game, sometimes it can be a distraction. Right. For a big game like this, it's one that it gets you pumped as a football player. It's like, hey, this school's behind us. These guys are, they're counting on us. And so I'm really interested to see how that one goes.
That's a dangerous game. Tyler Van's going to want to get in there and start quick, start early, like he did against similar travel. Glencoe and Hokes Bluff's going to be a similar travel. He did what he wanted to do in that game. He got out early. He showed dominance early. He's going to want to do that, but it's going to be tougher to do against this Hokes Bluff team. That game could get real interesting with that line only being 4. It's really interesting. This next one's another tremendous football game, and I don't even know where to start with this one. But Caleb, check this out. Clay Chalkwell, 7-0, 4-0. Put the whole state on notice when they beat Thompson.
They put the country on notice. That was a nationwide game.
This wasn't just a statewide game. This was on ESPN. This was as big as it can get. They beat Thompson in the biggest stage possible in high school football. Which you just said it. They put the country on notice. Well, they're going into a very dangerous game. They're traveling to Oxford. Oxford is 6-1, 4-0 in region play,
and could easily be 7-0. One play away.
Very well. We've talked about that play too.
No, but they're one play away from being 7-0.
We're 1 play being 7-0, and I think that one hurt them going into that loss. Hurt them going into that Pell City game, and they didn't perform like they wanted to in that Pell City game, but they did go score when they had to. And Coach talked about that. You sat down. You interviewed Sam Adams today. I sat down with him each and every week. We were out there this week. Brick Boy and I doing a video about their facility. Caleb, we're looking at 65,000 square foot indoor facility. The best in the state. Hands down.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
I think, there was a couple schools that rivaled them, Thompson being one of them, but Oxford really flexed their muscles with what they've just created there. New turf, new concession stand, new indoor 4,000 or 5,000 feet, square feet, 90 feet theater room in there. They really flexed their muscles. 26 rack, weight rooms, customizable. Everything's digital. They have rolling doors up and down. They have a wrestling arena inside
Huge
of this
for them.
thing. They got multiple girls' locker rooms inside there, multiple training facilities.
And their
in
girls'
there.
basketball's been on the rise over the last couple of years.
They own a Whitfield and Company, and they were for a state championship just 2 years ago against Hazel Green. Look, Larry Davison does a great job there as athletic director. Sam Adams is doing a great job as head coach there, and that's what Oxford is. They are a school on the rise. But let me tell you something. It's going to be a tall task this week. Clay Chalk was a 13-point favorite in the game. I love everything Oxford's doing. Oxford's not going away anytime soon. And if you want to get noticed on a statewide level immediately, Sam Adams wins this football game this Friday night in Oxford, Alabama. Instantly, everybody in the state is going to turn all eyes on them.
And on top of that, I mean, not to brag on us, but we put out the post about their weight room and all that. It's got over 1,600 shares. Brick Boy's about to have the video drop this week as well.
Yep.
You beat Clay Chalkville, and you've got all of that going on around.
Hey,
watch out.
Look, Caleb, we put that out a day ago, and it's reached over 400,000 people.
Yeah.
400,000, and kids are already talking about, wanting to come see it, be a part of, and that's why you create those things. You want to put out a product on the field that is desirable for kids to want to be there. You want kids in your own hallways to come play for you that maybe is not playing sports, and they see the commitment that the staff and people has done over there. So huge for Oxford with their kudos to them. And hey, look, if you want to take all of that they've done this with all this positive press and put jet fuel in it,
win.
beat this team right here.
Beat Clay Chalkville.
Beat Drew Gilmer and Company and prove that there's.
How about what Drew Gilmer's done over the last couple of years? I mean, you look at their last 3 years, their only losses are Parker and Thompson. I mean, that's it. It's the only two teams that have been able to beat them. They, came back and they beat Thompson this year. I'm sure they would love to see Parker again. There's definitely a good chance of that happening as well. So what they've done over the last couple of years has been incredible. Coach Hood did a great job when he was there for a couple of years. Then they had a few down years at the very beginning of Coach Gilmer's tenure, and he's gotten them back up and rolling, and it's the consistency, I think, that's so impressive. People don't understand how hard that is because
2 years ago, state champ.
Yeah, and I think you could tell last year there was some complacency that set in with that group
I think they
last
thought
season.
they had arrived.
Yeah, I think they thought they were just going to roll the ball out there and go win another state champ because everybody's telling them that. Yeah. Now you lose last year early. This is a hungry group, and they've shown that with how they've played this season. Auburn at Central Phoenix City, huge game in 7A right here. Auburn, it's a tough spot. They've been without their quarterback since the Enterprise game. They're still going to be without him in this game. He had a broken collarbone and some issues with the shoulder as well. And, it's put them in a tough spot, but you got to give Coach Keith Etheridge a ton of credit. I mean, the only game they've lost is the game that they lost their quarterback in, and they were leading that game, and then he got hurt, and it's, you could tell that was just a distraction for the team. It's like, oh, crap, and then I think they probably thought they had the game won as well. And next thing you know, it's like a couple years ago with Thompson with Auburn, they ended up losing the football game. Well, since then, they've gone on. They beat Dothan in overtime, which ends up, that's turned out to be a huge game. And maybe the difference in them getting a host and Dothan not getting a host there in the first round as well. And then they dominated Jag, which used to be Jeff Davis, dominated Percy Julian, which used to be Lee. And then they beat Ramsey 13-7, and that's a Ramsey offense that the very next week scored 65 points on Winona. They held them to 7 that night. And I mean, we're talking about Keenan at quarterback, and they got the running back from last year, and weapons all over at wide receiver. Held them to 7 points, and then a huge win over Opelika. They're trailing in that game. Opelika got off to an early lead. They fight back. They managed to score 31 without their starting quarterback on the road in a huge rivalry game to get a win. Got the week off last week to prepare for this one. Very interested to see how they show up. But they're getting a Phoenix City team who is, they've been dominant this year. I mean, listen to these scores. 48-24 over Hewitt, who is going to be the 2 seed in that region now. 51-0 over Smith Station. 48-7 over Enterprise right after they beat Auburn. And everybody was like, hey, can Enterprise beat Phoenix City? No. No. 28-18 over Opelika, which Opelika played them extremely well in that game. 55-0 over Jag. 48-4. We talked about Dothan, Phoenix City. We're like, hey, this is a chance. Dothan could pop up and beat them. 48-14 in that game. 35-6. I think they sleptwalked through the Percy Julian game a little bit. Had their sights set on this one against Auburn. Look, these two teams have played 2 times a year for the last however many years, and that's why we've been so excited about Mary Montgomery, because they might actually be the team to pop up and prevent that from actually happening again this year. But they've been playing in the regular season, meeting right back up in the semifinals, very similar to Hoover and Thompson over the last couple of years. So this is it was already a rivalry game beforehand, but I think since Coach Weingarten really got there, and then Coach Nix got there, and then Coach Etheridge came in, it's amped up that rivalry a lot, you know. And when Coach Dubose was there with Weingarten, Dubose and Weingarten kind of got it really back going to being a huge one, and then Coach Etheridge, Coach Nix have really kind of continued that down there. It's a huge game. You know, Phoenix City's favored by 12. The biggest key in this game is going to be Auburn's defense. If they can play defense, if they can keep this Phoenix City offense off the board, who has scored 35 or more every single game this year, they're going to give themselves an opportunity. But it's going to take the defense really stepping up for Auburn in order for them to be able to win this game. Coach Etheridge knows that. I'm going to have the Coach Keith Etheridge show up later on this week, going to visit with him tomorrow. So I'm really looking forward to getting his thoughts on this game, how they handled the bye week last week, and are getting prepared to go on the road and face a really good Phoenix City team.
They want to muddy this game up.
Yeah, no,
muddy
100%.
it up, drag it over in the fourth
You know, we were
quarter.
talking about Hoax Bluff and how they send the quarterback over and then bring him back out. Well, Coach Etheridge may want to try just doing that this week. Hey, however long you can keep that offense off the field, try to do it. Try to make it a low-scoring game. And, you know, I think Auburn won the semifinal game last year 17-14.
They weren't favored
beat
to
pretty
win
handily. Yeah, and they got beat pretty handily in the regular. I think it's 26-0 in the regular season.
That's coaching, buddy.
Yeah, so Coach Etheridge deserves a lot of credit. All right, it is time for our Watkins Heating and Cooling Game of the Week. I think a lot of people that are still tuned in have been waiting for us to talk about this one, Bo. And
we haven't forgotten it.
Real quickly, before we get going on this one, again, I want to thank Brad Watkins with Watkins Heating and Cooling. For all you people right up there around Pisgah and Fife, make sure to check him out. Look, it's that time of year. It's cold. I mean, when Bo is in long sleeves, you know it's gotten a little chilly out here. So you better have your heating and cooling units ready to go. And there's no better person to call than Brad Watkins with Watkins Heating and Cooling, LLC. And we appreciate his sponsorship with our games of the week. There's no secret what the game of the week was going to be. We talked about it a bunch last week. We talked about it on Saturday. Pisgah, 7-0, 5-0 in the region. At Fife, 6-1, 5-0 in the region. The line has Fife favored by 9 points. Part of that's being at home, and I think part of it's also the past. You know, I think Fife's just almost kind of earned the right to be a favorite, and if you want to be the king, you got to knock off the king. This is Pisgah's opportunity right here.
If you want to sit down at the game, you better be there.
You better be there about 4 o'clock. Yeah.
You better be there when Big Man walks in if you want to sit down at the game.
You want to beat. If Pisgah arrives to the stadium before you do, you're probably not sitting down and watching this.
I'm serious.
No, yeah, I mean it's
on either side.
Yeah,
on either side. Now they do have plenty of standing room there at Five, because in these big games they fill that fence line up really nicely.
And if you got a kid, you may want to be prepared to put him on your shoulders.
Yeah, because he's going to need some help if he wants to see this football game. Caleb, I don't know. You can break this thing down 26 ways from Wednesday, and it's going to boil down to a couple of things. And it's something that both of these teams do really well. Everybody thought going into that well, let's go ahead and break these records down. Pisgah 7-0, 5-0 in region play. Fife 6-1, 5-0 in region play. This is the region championship game. This is anything hosting. I mean, they're both going to host. This is a region championship game, but everybody thought, I'm going to start breaking it down like this. Everybody thought when Pisgah went to Sylvania, after seeing what Sylvania did to Geraldine just the week or so before they played each other, everybody thought Pisgah's a really good football team because we've seen what they did to Collinsville, but they can't stand up to the physicality and what Sylvania is going to bring to the table, because we saw what they did in the half football versus Geraldine. Now, what we didn't realize is they can, and they did. And they come out of there victorious on what looked like an unbeatable Sylvania team, all right? That put the state on notice. Well, guess what? Coach Benefield has noticed them before the season. Coach Benefield told me this is a really good Pisgah team, And if you talk to Luke Pruitt, guess what he says? This is a really good Fife team. And guess what? Both of them's correct.
Both of them are right. Yep.
Both of these, whoever wins this game on Friday, I'm not going to be shocked.
Yeah.
But it's going to come down to this right here, Caleb. This offensive line for Fife has improved each week since that Geraldine game. People don't realize in that Geraldine game they held Geraldine defensively to 135 yards. Geraldine had the short field to work with. And Michael Davis did a good job of capitalizing on that, and that's what ultimately got them that victory. But since that time, Coach has moved some guys around. He's plugged and played, and Anderson's gotten healthy.
That's the biggest one.
That's the biggest one.
Yeah.
Now, on the other side of the ball, what Pisgah does really well is they protect their quarterback. They run clean routes, and they look like a machine offensively. If you think the one chink in the armor, the one Achilles heel for Fife has been over the years, is teams that can throw the ball consistently underneath, dink and doink, get guys open. And Fife will give you a lot of that because they're going to make you snap it one more time, snap it one more time. That's their goal. Now, they want you to snap it one more time. So which team up front is going to show dominance? Which team don't turn the ball over? Which team don't let the stage get too good? And Fife being at home, is that an advantage for them? Absolutely. When you're playing Fife, Alabama, it's going to be an advantage. But can Pisgah get over that myth? I don't know, say myth. It's a mental thing though. Can you get over that thing of we haven't beaten these guys? Because last year, check us out, Fife won 40-6 and 41-14. Can you get over that hurdle? Can you get over that hurdle? I think Luke Pruitt is a guy who can get them in that position to do it. The guys have to go execute. Again, I think that line's too high. I think this is a very good, I think this is going to be a 4-quarter game. And like I said, if either team wins, I'm not going to be shocked on Friday night. That's my breakdown of it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Here's some numbers that stuck out to me about Fife. They're averaging 46.4 points per game, and they're giving up 5.3 points per game, which is incredible. Take away the Geraldine game, they're averaging 53.1 points per game and giving up 3.3. I mean, that's just incredible.
Incredible.
You know, here's the thing about this game here for Pisgah. You just talked about it. You've got to get over the mental hurdle. You've got to get over the fact that it's Fife. You can't, go play a faceless team. You know, don't worry about the F out there and all that stuff. I mean, go play a faceless team. Do what you've done each and every week. Take the same kind of mindset you took into Sylvania, the same type of game plan. I'm very interested to see how this game goes because you just talked about they got to win up front. That's where they lost these 2 games last year was up front. Fife was able to be more physical than them. They were able to push them around some. I'm sure very similar to how we just talked to Guntersville and their players talking about, it was beat into us all offseason that we lost 2 games. And we don't want –
let's do these
2 losses.
Reps.
They've been beat into Pisgah. Weights. Yeah, exactly. And so Pisgah's had this game circled. I don't think there's any secret about it. The thing that I'm looking forward to seeing is we've kind of seen this with Hoover and Thompson the last couple of years, where – at one time, it was Thompson chasing Hoover for a long time, and then Thompson finally beat him in the regular season. Well, then they had to turn around and do it again in the semifinals, and once they did that, they got over the hump. For Pisgah, this is an important game, but more than likely, you're going to have to do it twice, and that's the biggest thing. And that's also, if you lose this game, you got to keep that mindset as well of, hey, we may see these guys again. This isn't our only opportunity. We're
probably going to see these guys
and this isn't our only opportunity. So, it's not the end-all, be-all with this game. Both teams are going to be hosting in the first round of the playoffs, but I think from a program standpoint for Pisgah, it's very important because it gets you over that mental hurdle, and when you do see them again, if both teams can get to that point, now you've gotten over that part's out of the way, and you can get out there and go play football, in the semifinals later on this year if they end up meeting up. So, really interesting here. Also, what I'm interested in is Fife has been in a bunch of big games.
Yes.
They've been in state championship games, just played one last year. They've been down 16-0 to Montgomery Catholic, who it looked like at the time was about to run them off the field. B.B. Comer came out the gates on fire last year and was about to take a 16-0 lead early in that game. They don't ever panic. And so that's what's going to be interesting. If Pisgah comes out the gate hot, you got to keep the intensity. If you let up at any point in the game, Fife is going to get back in the football game. Fife makes you play all 48 minutes, and they're going to make Pisgah play all 48 minutes. And if Pisgah can go and do that, all of a sudden you've got a new favorite in 2A going into the playoffs this
Pisgah's been building since Luke Pruitt's been there for this moment.
Yeah.
For this moment right here, those guys that he inherited, he took those lumps and bruises as freshmen, 8th graders, and sophomores. Now those are seniors and juniors and a lot of seniors. They've been building for this moment. This is their peak. Now this ain't the end all be all as you said, but from a program changing standpoint, it is in certain ways.
Because we saw when Thompson had to beat Hoover. Thompson is not who they are right now. If Talia Tungavailoa doesn't dive into the end zone, which ultimately ended up hurting his shoulder, which killed them against Phoenix City in the state championship.
In the rain, in the pouring rain.
They almost sacrificed winning it that year to just get over the hump of Hoover. And now they've won countless state championships. So I'm not saying that's going to happen for Pisgah, but it would just be a huge program change. It's one you kind of have to get this game to get over that mental hurdle, show we can beat these guys. They're not above us. They're not anything, that's too special for us to be able to go out and handle. So,
and final breakdown on this one. If you're either one of these two coaches, do you not empty your clip in this one? Do you save something knowing that you're probably going to cross paths again?
Because, we've seen that from Mark Freeman against Hoover the last couple of years.
I'm not saying he threw a game, but I've seen Coach Smith lose to AHSAA or somebody and then turn around in the playoffs and go win the whole thing.
Yeah. That's another thing you have to be careful of if you're Pisgah. If you win the game, feel good about yourself, but you can't just feel like, that means we're automatically going to win when we see them again. So
either one of these two coaches.
Look, we expect to see this matchup twice. Just being upfront about it, it's up to somebody else in 2A to come and make some noise. Locust Fork, man.
Yeah, prove us
maybe
wrong.
One of those teams that can do that. So
prove us wrong.
Prove us wrong. It's up to you. So we don't pick games, but right now I would pick for these two teams to see each other twice this year.
And I would pick that line lower than that.
Yeah,
I would.
Under 9 for sure.
I would, personally.
Looking forward to this one. It's going to be a big one Friday. I'm looking forward to hearing you and Tara talk about it on the post-game show. Yeah, should be a lot of fun.
We're actually going to that one, so we'll be there.
Yeah, well, hey, should be a lot of fun matchups on Friday. Like I've said each and every week, if you don't have NFHS Network and you're not going out
Shout
on
out
Fridays.
to Jason Bethune, B-Man.
Hey, yeah, go Big Red there from Jason.
Brad Watkins.
And again, thank you to Brad Watkins, Watkins Heating and Cooling, for our sponsorship here each and every week with the Watkins Heating and Cooling Games of the Week. I know he is going to be very, very excited to see the Fife Red Devils take the field on Friday night. So it should be a fun one. That'll do it for us. We'll be here on Saturday morning to break down all these games, give you all the scores. So make sure to tune in Saturday morning for our Saturday morning recap show. For Bo Starkey, I'm Caleb Brooks.